You are listening to episode 51 of The Secular Buddhist. Welcome to The Secular Buddhist. I'm Ted Meissner. The Secular Buddhist is the podcast and website for modern, secular application of early Buddhist thought. The podcast has interviews and roundtable discussions pertaining to engaged Buddhist training and practice, and the companion website has show notes for each episode, along with resource materials on Buddhism, critical thinking, science, secularism, and skeptical thought. Though the podcast focuses on core practice from a secular viewpoint, more traditional teachings are welcome and openly discussed. Author Chris McKenna speaks with us today about his post-apocalyptic Buddhist theme book, Paradigms. I think it's fair to say that Buddhism is becoming something of a culturally iconic practice, even in the West. Just about everyone would recognize the Dalai Lama. The once utterly foreign idea of contemplating your navel is no longer so foreign. Eastern thought got lots of press with the Beatles. Richard Gere's following of Vajrayana is well known, and the new Tron movie sequel unabashedly includes meditation. The arts are clearly on board. And though it seems a shelf-load of new Buddhist-themed books come out every month these days, we're not seeing many fantasy Buddhist-themed books. Many of us loved reading Siddhartha, and more recently Ko-un's Little Pilgrim. Both took their plot lines and scenes directly out of Buddhist tradition, and have done a wonderful job of it. What we haven't seen so much is the taking of these themes out of their Eastern roots and placing them squarely in a totally different realm. Chris McKenna was born in 1983 in Blantyre, Scotland. He has a background in computer science, having graduated from the University of Strathclyde, and worked for a few years in the programming industry in both Scotland and subsequently in Vienna, Austria. Chris decided to venture out and became an English language teacher in Asia after deciding that sitting behind a computer all day was not for him. Oddly enough, he now spends a lot of his time behind his computer writing. Chris plans to give 30% of his proceeds from his new book Paradigms, a fantasy set in a post-apocalyptic Scotland, to Book Aid International, a charity that promotes literacy in developing countries. Chris has recently been teaching English at a university in Yokohama, Japan. So, sit back, relax, and have a nice tea. Earl Grey, hot. I know we've done it before, but that was by special request. And we're here with author Chris McKenna. Chris, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. Nice to be here.
Very glad to have you. Now, we're talking to you over in Japan, is where you are right now, but you're originally from Scotland. I want you to chat about that in a second. But one of the things I did want to mention to the listeners is that this is a different Buddhist Chris McKenna than the Chris McKenna we have spoken with in an earlier podcast.
Far too many of us.
Just wanted to make sure. It's apparently a guy's named Chris McKenna. Good people to have on the podcast, apparently.
It's true. I'm going to have a call to get my Google ratings higher, though. Just get rid of all those other Chris McKennas out there.
It's all about the keywords. It's all about the keywords.
It is, yeah. Far too many of them.
So what we're talking about today is that, Chris, you have a book that just very recently, over the past week or two, came out called Paradigms.
Yeah.
And
right.
What you've done is, it's really unique, and I want to get to that in a moment, but first I want to have the audience have a chance to hear from you and have you tell us a little bit about where you're from and your early encounters with Buddhism.
Okay, fair enough. Well, stop me if you've heard this one. But, yeah, no, I was a Catholic. I was very, very Catholic when I was young. Full intentions of becoming a Catholic priest until I was about 16. Altar boy, Eucharistic minister, various things like that. And I think by the time I was 16, and I started university when I was 16, And I think by that point I was having a lot of doubts. But when I went to university, you're suddenly meeting all these people, which for a boy from a sort of Catholic school, where most people are nominally Catholic at least, suddenly all these different religions, atheists, people who are, quite anti-Christian as well. I think it just sort of, brought it all up, and I pretty much decided, that no, it wasn't really for me to be a Catholic anymore, or a Christian. And then I kind of got involved in the whole alternative culture for a while and went a bit mad. And
as we all do in college, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I never actually became a goth, but I certainly had a lot of friends who were in that sort of, darker side of things. It's quite a strange culture, actually. It's like from the outside, these people can appear quite scary, sort of all dressed in black and and whatnot. But when you're actually inside, they're some of the most intelligent and friendly people you'll ever meet. It's quite amazing.
Yeah, I've had a wonderful time with some goth friends that I used to hang out with in Madison, Wisconsin here, and it's, it was the paramilitary boots with, the 5-inch platform heels and all the leather gear and all that jazz, and sweet and some of the most normal people I've ever met.
Yeah, I mean, they do just seem to get it. They're very chilled out about life a lot of the time. They don't tend to get, too into the commercial side of things. They're quite detached in many ways. So, yeah, often very well read. But yeah, I had a great time. Got a lot of anger out my system at that point, I think. And then it wasn't really till I went to Vienna. I was working as not a programmer, software test engineer, in Scotland. And then I got made redundant and I got a job offer in Vienna and I moved out there. And I think I kind of got a lot of freedom. I chilled out a lot. And it was at that point I really sort of started meditating, but very much in a secular context. I wasn't doing anything to do with any religion at that point. I was just kind of trying to find my own way.
Yeah. As you were there, was there a particular place that you were going, or was it meditation on your own?
No. I mean, I think almost the entirety of my recent religion experiences have been internet based. Yeah, I mean, I read a lot of philosophy and stuff, but yeah, most of it I was just sort of reading random people's websites and getting ideas and things. And then I think I decided I'd had enough with office work, and I just wanted to do something that was a bit more, and that was when I ended up moving out to China to teach for a while. And for anyone that's considering it, I would thoroughly recommend just, moving out for a year or so and trying teaching. It's good fun. It can be stressful, but it's good fun most of the time. And yeah, in China, of course, while it's an atheist country, there's still a lot of Buddhist stuff there, even after the Cultural Revolution. I have to be honest, when I encountered the culture in China, I looked at it and thought, oh, that's very nice, but it's not for me. Lots of incense and bowing and whatnot, and I thought, it's all very good, but no. And so I actually ended up getting involved in, I don't know if you know the whole Gnostic thing.
A little bit, and it's not something that I've studied, but tell us a little bit about what your experiences with it were.
Well, again, it was mainly online experiences. There's a guy, I think, called Stefan Heller, somewhere in the States. He's sort of trying to revive it. And it's kind of like Buddhism. I can say this retrospectively, but it's kind of like Buddhism mixed with Christianity. Sort of halfway house between the two. I mean, they've got reincarnation and other stuff in there as well. But ultimately, it's a dead tradition. It was, the Cathars were sort of wiped out in the Crusades. And there isn't really anyone who knows what the practices actually were. So the ideas are all very good, but it's a bit lost.
We're kind of making it up as we go along.
Yeah, there is a lot of that to it. They're kind of trying to find their own way, and it's very admirable, but they don't really have any sort of concrete practice there that I've seen anyway. And then I was wanting to find out more about meditation, because by this point I was getting into it, and I ended up on the website of the FWBO. They have a website called Free Buddhist Audio, Yeah, so they're quite a big group in the UK by the sounds of it. They're very different, I guess, from the sort of my Chinese experience with Buddhism, in that they're more focused on the philosophy and less focused on, worshipping statues and things like this. Um, and yeah, I think I listened to, they've got a load of lectures online, and I listened to some of that, and I sort of, just listening to their stuff, they never actually converted me to Buddhism. I just sort of realized at that point, I'm already a Buddhist.
A lot of us have that aha moment. Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I'm a vegetarian. I mean, I know some of these things people will consider optional and whatnot, but, I'm a vegetarian, I've given up drinking, I'm meditating. I moved out to China, in order to get a sort of better right livelihood. And it was just that sort of aha moment, like you're saying, this click of, I'm already a Buddhist. And then from there, it's been very much a sort of private practice. Being out quite, I had to go to the east to discover a Buddhist group in the west, and yeah, so I've just been listening to their lectures. I've been in contact with a few people from their organization, just chatting with sort of questions I had on email and things. There was a guy called Kamala Sheila, and he was very much into the practice side of things, and I sent a few emails to him, and he helped me out with a few questions. But yeah, apart from that, I've just been sort of plodding along and reading various books and general practice.
So one of the things I wanted to get to, and really why we're here, is to chat about what you've done, which is fairly unique in writing what is it's a post-apocalyptic fantasy with Buddhist themes. And
yeah.
Well done, because that's an interesting mix, and it's the kind of book that devoid the Buddhist themes. I still would have been reading that. That's something I find interesting anyway in my leisure reading time. But to have something that incorporated throughout, and not just in bits and pieces, but throughout the book, you have Buddhist themes running in this. So what I want to ask, and we'll get into a few of those, is how did you start and what prompted you to write Paradigms? And I should say the book is named Paradigms.
How I got started, I'd been writing little bits and pieces for a while, and generally I was kind of having a sort of split personality disorder when it came to writing. On one side I was trying to write sort of fun fantasy. On the other side I was trying to write like, Herman Hesse style,
yeah.
Sort of serious contemplative books. Herman Hesse is by far my favorite author. And I would love to be able to write like him, but, I had that sort of bipolar thing going on, that I started writing one and then I wanted to write the other. And then at some point I just came up with this story. I think it was Home for Christmas, and I was chatting to my friend, who did the cover, incidentally, Gary Welsh. And, I just, I came up with a story in a way that I could sort of combine the two things together, the sort of love of fantasy and science fiction with, my own culture, my own Scottish culture, with my explorations of the East, and try and sort of smash it together into one book. And that's kind of the idea of it, was trying to do everything at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Now, give us a bit of a synopsis of the book, and I'll mention to people there is a link to the book. You can get it on Amazon. So it's on the episode page for this episode on the secularbuddhist.com. But give us a synopsis of what the book is about.
Yeah. So it all starts after some unknown disaster, and it's not directly afterwards. It's years and years after it, and the people of Scotland, to some extent, have reformed or reverted into some kind of clan-like existence. So they're back living in clans, and to some extent living off the old world. Raiding each other and trying to keep a hold of all the other old artifacts that they have. And then you've got this young guy, Malcolm, who has a feeling that I guess many people listening to this will probably be familiar with, and it's being out of place, being part of a group, but just not really feeling part of it all. But at the same time, really not feeling he has a choice. There's sort of two main paths open to him, and he doesn't really like the look of either of them. And then things conspire. I don't want to give too much too much for any budding readers, but things happen, and he finds himself out in the world, and he finds himself exploring this world, which is quite fantastical in many ways. Yeah, he meets different characters, many of whom are trying to impose their own paradigm, it's the name of the book, onto the forming world. And it's all these competing ideas about philosophical and physical, about how the world should be, and other things. And he has to make a choice to some extent as to which direction he's going to go on these things. One thing I should point out, though, I feel I have to say, is that I don't know anything. I just want to be clear on that, just in case anyone's wondering. I am not claiming to have any special great experience or something. For me, this book was about understanding the teachings myself and understanding the conflicts within myself. So many of the different paradigms in the book are things that I can feel attached towards. There's one that's a sort of animistic, just go back to nature and live. And there's another one that's, quite crusader almost, sort of, for the greater good, sort of becoming a bad guy to save the world, almost a soldier in many ways. And it's almost like giving these different parts inside me a voice and letting them play out. So I don't know anything. I'm not trying to reveal some hidden truth to anybody or anything like that. This is, I've taken the teachings that I've heard and used them in a book.
That was one of the really nice things that I liked about the book in reading it, is that you have Malcolm encounter things that are well outside of his growing up. They're outside of his range of experience. Yeah, and they're entirely different ways of looking at the world from what he's had, and you examine several different ways of how the characters in the book are looking at things and how that has impacted their lives, and you contrast them very well, because as you mentioned, you have the very Crusader-like characters and how they're dealing with this world that they're living in and what it's like, and you have a monastic culture and their non-participation kind of approach to living, and then you have other groups who are very active and want to run things their way, and just so you examine that a great deal throughout the book.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely the sort of the main focus of the book was, how you have all these competing ideas and how ultimately none of us really know which one is right. We can all have our different beliefs, our faith in what we think is right, but at the end of the day, none of us really know yet. And I'm sure some people know, or hopefully some people will come to know. But sometimes we place a lot of faith in something that is just an idea.
You examine that most with Malcolm is the main character, and his best friend growing up is Thomas.
Yeah.
And part of the book is you essentially have these two guys who are very much alike, and they had some subtle differences, and they make different choices. They have different paradigm shifts in how they approach the world. Yeah. That, you get to examine, they're away for a while and they're apart and they make their different choices, and then they encounter each other and end up traveling together again, and how that affects at their core who they are, and you physicalize that with the advantage of writing a fantasy book.
Yeah, I mean, the whole fantasy aspect, again, something I was a little concerned about was, anybody actually believing that I thought that meditation gave you special powers. I know there are certain, suttas and whatnot that sort of profess that it does. Definitely nothing I've had experience with. But the powers were a way to show in stark contrast the different ways of approaching the world.
Yeah, they're a wonderful metaphor in how you physicalized it with the characters and the and the, frankly magical way in which it affects them and who they are. And that's done quite well in that it makes the characters interesting because there's changes to them.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I've sort of stolen it slightly from, I don't know, have you ever read Journey to the West?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The whole Monkey King thing. I mean, I suppose that's one of the earliest examples that I know of.
Liberated the idea. You liberated the idea.
Liberated the idea from this, ancient Chinese Buddhist story of, meditation giving you fantastical powers. I mean, I think it's more extreme, I think, probably in the Monkey King or Journey to the West, with fighting demons and it certainly has an element of that in it.
But you do have the adventure component in that as well. Now, what are some of the other themes that you yourself liked writing about when you were putting paradigms together?
Probably there's one character in the book called Judas, who I enjoyed writing probably the most.
He was my favorite character. Yeah, I'm glad you brought him up because he was okay. Awesome.
I'm glad. He's very fun to write. Just that sort of uncompromising, have it his own way because he's got the power to have it his own way sort of guy. Fun to write. But he for me was to represent a sort of danger in myself. I'm sure people listening will have noticed at the beginning how I kind of jumped from one thing to another, eventually landing on Buddhism where I hope I'd stopped. But even inside Buddhism, there seems to be this huge danger of, okay, I've done Tibetan Buddhism. Okay, now I'm going to do Zen Buddhism. Okay, now I'm going to do, Theravadan or whatever. And Judas was for me a lot to do with that, about this, reading everything and doing nothing and understanding nothing to any depth, just consuming, I think especially for Western Buddhists, something I've noticed is a huge tendency for myself and perhaps others to be very scholastic about it. We think we can read ourselves into enlightenment. And that was one thing for me that I don't know if I knew it before I started writing, but when I wrote that character, that was definitely something I wanted to bring out, was this person who can't really fix himself on one idea and keeps, change is good, change is important, but you have to have some, rigor, some boundaries in order to get that proper change. Otherwise you're reading other stuff, but you're not changing, the stuff you're reading is changing. Whereas the changes have to be internal rather than external.
As they are with the character, and those of you listening, and you and I have already geeked out a little bit on Star Trek before in our emails when we were chatting. Those of you who have watched Deep Space Nine, to me, he struck me as like if you had a sociopathic Odo.
Okay, yeah, that's a pretty good description, actually. Yeah, I like
that. But nonetheless, still seeking in the same way that Odo in some fashion is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons that made him the most interesting character, because he was not predictable. He was one that you knew he was going through his own stuff too, because that's the only reason a character like this would be doing what he's doing.
I guess, it's that kind of Loki-esque trickster that's, he's part of the story, but he's kind of away doing his own thing, and it's, part of the story and separate from the story at the same time. So yeah, that was definitely one of the major themes.
So now I did cheat, and I read an article online which says that you're planning to give a third of the takings from the book sales to an organization called Book Aid International, a charity. Tell us a little bit about what they do, how you picked them.
Initially, actually, I was looking for something that promotes interfaith dialogue. And I'm sure there must be people out there, but I couldn't really find something straight away. There seemed to be a lot of groups that were doing, getting the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu together, and surprisingly, they got on very well. It seemed a bit vapid to some extent what they were doing. There was nothing that was really doing, grassroots community work that I found. I'm sure there are. If you know any, let me know.
Yeah, people, if you do know any, let us know. Write in. Be happy to hear about it.
Yeah. So I was trying to find something like that, and I didn't. And then I I ended up finding this about book aid, and for me, they tie together what I'm trying to do here in Asia, which is a lot of education, often sometimes in developing countries, although I'm in Japan at the moment, so it's not true. But, it's my education side with my writing side, and it seemed to bring it together. So they're a very good charity, and they're trying to send books to different parts of the world, mainly sub-Saharan Africa. And they send millions of books, and they work with different publishers and whatnot to send books across to Africa. What I liked about them was that they weren't just doing textbooks. They do textbooks. They do send textbooks to help with studying and whatnot. But they're also providing libraries, with just books for people to read for fun. And I think for someone like me, like I said, for me, probably my biggest Buddhist teacher has been Hermann Hesse. I've sort of learned about Buddhism and just life in general through a lot of writers. I think what they're trying to do is just, give people books to read so that they can grow as people. It's not just about education, but the education is part of it as well. And I think it's a really admirable thing that they're doing. And, it seemed like a good place to support.
It does. Taking a look online for people listening to the podcast via iTunes, the organization is Book Aid International, and their website is www.bookaid.org. That's BOOKAID.org. And they have really good suggestions on there about how to get involved in different things that you can do to promote literacy and books to people who really need them. So I think it was a really good choice, Chris, for you to have taken that one.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think it came up. It might have been when you were talking to the other Chris McKenna. If my hitman hasn't got him yet. It may, and I think you were talking about, Buddhism and generosity at some point with him. Is that right? Is that the right person?
I could be, yeah, because we were chatting about some assistance that they are doing in programs he's involved with that are assisting youth who are at risk and have been really kind of forgotten and set aside, and society doesn't typically engage with them. And really, these are people too. They need help, and who better to give it than those of us who have gone through harder times ourselves and have the resources and the ability to help a fellow human being.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like I remember I specifically looked up his, obviously with the same name, it sounds like he's doing some really admirable and fantastic stuff, and to have a further look into it. But I think he brought up the point about, Buddhism and generosity. And, I think, we're always talking about being careful not to, when you're talking about secularizing Buddhism, people are always saying about being careful not to throw away all the good stuff about the old tradition. But I think as well, on the other side, when we come from Christian countries, ultimately, or formerly Christian countries, I think that's one thing we need to be careful of as well, is not throwing away the good stuff that we have in our own cultures to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I'm not a Catholic anymore, but I think some of the stuff that Christians do is incredibly admirable on the charity side. Far more, at least in my experience, maybe my perception if it's wrong. Maybe their advertising's better, but it seems
they have good PR.
Yeah, good PR. It just seems to be far more than any other religion. Now, Buddhists can be quite introspective, and we sometimes forget to look outwards, and we're focused on teaching the Dharma and whatnot, and that's good. But I think sometimes Christianity shows us up in many respects with the hard work that people do in actually going out and doing charity, and I think that's something we really need to keep from our own culture.
I think you're right. We're relatively new. We as Buddhists in the West, I'll put it that way, are relatively new organizationally. We're still getting our sea legs. And, we haven't been in an established order, if you will, and there's still lots of different kinds, but having as a focus that concept of charity. There's not a Salvation Army Buddhist version yet.
Yes.
And it may be that comes around, and it's certainly growing, and that's one of the things that as we look at our society, we see the benefits of creating, as I'm reading the book by Sam Harris, now his new book, and he's very much about creating a culture of well-being and talking about that, the helping one another, that altruism is part of being human, and it's not relegated to a particular segment of society, a particular social strata of society. It's not a particular religion or ideological view. It is something that sentient creatures, it's part of our being to be altruistic in the right circumstances, and that's something that we can grow. So it was very nice to see that it's not just, I made a book, buy my book. It's, certainly buy my book. It's called Paradigms. Did I mention that? It is a good book. I had a lot of fun reading it. I love the characters. But what you're doing is, and I think you said this on your website or on one of the interviews that is linked on the episode page, that you wanted to give back, that you want to show how this is put into practice, and that's one reason that you had decided to do this with Bookgate International.
Yeah, there were certain aspects in the book that were about being compassionate, I guess. It would be profoundly hypocritical to sort of release a book talking about compassion and then not give anything away from it. So
one of the things I also wanted to ask about is that you've been teaching in Asian countries for a while now. You've been in China. Currently you're in Japan. And I wanted to ask, because based on your experience, you have a point of view that many of us in the West don't have, because we don't get out a lot, like me. I'm snowbound right now. I can't get anywhere. You've traveled, and you've seen how Buddhism has been practiced in Western cultures, and you've seen it in a couple of different Eastern cultures. How are you seeing these differences in how Buddhism is perceived in the East compared with what you've experienced in the West?
Oh, it's a big question.
A big question. Take your time on this one, because I know it's big.
I think a couple of weeks ago, I'm dreadful with names, so I apologize to him, but I'll call him the Zen guy. What was the Zen guy called?
Brad Warner.
Brad Warner, yeah.
Brad Warner, Sex, Sin, and Zen, his book. Yep.
Yeah, he's much better at names than me. I should get him to write the next name of the next title of my book.
Write the name of the next incarnation. There you go.
Yeah. He mentioned about Japan, and there is nowhere to go and meditate in a temple, at least not for a non-monk.
Yeah, he mentioned that in the interview we did, which at the point this has come out, it's been a few weeks ago, but in the interview that he did, episode 45, I think it is, he mentions that he's in Japan, and they made arrangements to go to a temple in Japan, and they're like, let him in a room, and then they left, and they're like, that's it? It's like, yeah, it's not really a meditative practice here.
Yeah. So that's really been, I'm sorry to say, sort of my main experience of Buddhism out in the East. I've not been in Japan that long, and I'm leaving shortly. But so there could be a further depth to it that I've just not came across. I'm sort of mainly in the Tokyo, Yokohama area. It's quite businessy. Maybe when you get out to the temples in the forests and whatnot, there's a huge difference. So I can't really speak for that. In China, I visited a lot of temples. But many of them they're much more tourist attractions.
Yeah, it sounds that way, yeah.
Normally they have gates, you pay to get in, and lots of people taking photos. There are monks there, but the way someone explained it to me, and please, if I'm wrong on this, someone come in and correct me. But for a lot of monks in China, it's basically that they were orphans, and the temple was a way of it's a way to support orphans in many ways. They're almost like orphanages for boys, and there is Buddhism there, definitely. There are older people mainly most younger people are strictly atheist. But it does tend to be religious Buddhism. And it tends to be praying for that that I get more money and that I get better, and it does tend to be more that kind of thing. Thailand, I went to Thailand and I did a meditation, not a retreat there, but I did some meditating there with a group, I guess. And I was talking to the guy there, and he told me, he was Thai, and he told me pretty much the same thing. He said in Thailand it's pretty much a religion except for the monks. But he was part of a movement inside Thailand that were trying to change that, and they were trying to get more, how would you call it, lay people to take part in meditation and, try and see it as more of a practice and philosophical thing than just as a religion. So I think it is there in China, probably in Japan, in Thailand, but it can be quite difficult to find. Borobudur, it was sort of Muslimized Buddhism. It's quite strange. I had a tour guide who was a Muslim, and he was telling me, maybe this comes from somewhere, but he was telling me, for example, the Buddha had a virgin birth like that, and it seemed to be he was trying to find, which is, not necessarily a bad thing, but he was trying to find a commonality with things that would be good in Islam and things that would be good in, trying to put them together. Yeah, but I heard there are some places in Indonesia which are quite good for meditation practice. But again, it's one of these things you really have to sort of go looking for.
You have the experience yourself, yeah.
Yeah, so like I said, I kind of had to come to the east to find out that, really, it'd be quite good to go to the west at the moment for a lot of the stuff that's growing and going on there with Buddhism. Yeah.
Interesting. I as I recall, there's a friend of mine that I actually went through lay ordination with in the Soto Zen tradition many years ago, and a couple of my brothers and sisters in that ceremony have gone on to become priests in that tradition. And as I recall, one of them has spent a great deal of time in Japan doing concentrated meditative retreats. So I know that there are temples that really do focus on that they've been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, and that they're kind of the premier places to go for that. So they do exist, but it's I'll see if I can find this and link it on the episode page, and find it. I can think of the name, and I would butcher its pronunciation, so I won't say it now, but I'll do some verification and get a link to people on that, because I know it's out there, and I think some of the experiences that you're describing it can be harder to find, and Brad Warner was saying the same thing.
Yeah, I went to a temple the other day, and just anybody who's thinking of coming to Japan, I'm not trying to put you off in any way. The temples are amazing. It's definitely worth going just for I think Japanese people would say, the feeling of the temple. They are quite amazing, or the Shinto shrines as well are also fantastic. Yeah, I have kind of looked around a little bit, but maybe I just need to be more diligent in my search. No, but I do get the feeling it's there, and I think it can be almost frustrating in a way, in that you feel it's just out of reach somehow. But yeah, it's a nice place, and I think there's a lot of stuff you can get about Buddhism just simply from being here. And in China as well, there are things that are in the culture which are Buddhist.
I was going to say, there seems to be a greater a culture of mindful attention to the present moment, and we see this in things like the tea ceremony and
the cherry
flower arranging and archery and all of that. There's very much a focus on every facet of being aware of just one's motion in the present moment.
Yeah, it's definitely true. And in China, they've got it here as well. I think he mentioned it in that last podcast, was this whole idea of nothing you can do about it. I think Meo Banfao in Chinese, I don't know the Japanese one, but it's a very huge part of their culture, which is, if you can't change it, stop worrying about it.
Yeah, don't get bent out of shape.
It's just like, well, put it aside, forget about it. You can't, yes, it's a terrible thing, but you can't change it, so just, go with it. Whereas in the West, we tend to be more, fight it, rise up, destroy everything, and I'm sure that's good in some situations, but, it is very much a part of the culture here. So I think you can get it indirectly in many ways.
So, Chris, what's coming up next for you? The book has come out, and there's a lot of attention being generated around that. Are you thinking about writing another book, or what's coming next for you?
Yeah, I've started on my second book. Yeah, I'm only on about chapter 4 or something. It's early days, but this time I was actually doing something which was a bit more light-hearted. Paradigms is quite heavy. So this book is still got a lot of Buddhist themes in it, and it's actually based very, very, very loosely on the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and a lot of the images that come from that. You might have noticed some of them in Paradigms, but
I did.
This one's going to be more focused on that, and it's going to be a lot more young adult. So it's a lot more fast-paced and a lot more light-hearted. I'm hoping the Buddhist themes are all still going to be in it in many ways, or Eastern themes, or just general philosophical thought. But just keep it quite light. This one I'm writing in the perspective of a 16-year-old girl, and I'm taking a lot of stick from my friends. So, 16-year-old schoolgirl, I might have issues. But yeah, no, it's quite a fun book to write. I'm quite enjoying and I'm doing it in a different perspective. I'm trying to do it in a sort of first person this time, and first person present, which is often a bit of a no-no in writing circles, but seemingly it's the way to go for young adults. So it's different, and it's nice to sort of write in that first person perspective.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to having you on the podcast again to talk about that when it comes out, because I will be I'll be eager to read it, certainly by the themes, and I mentioned that on your website, and I just wanted to mention to people listening to the podcast, if you're interested in following what Chris is doing, his website is www.mckennastories.co.cc, and we spell that out for you, www.mckennastories.co.cc. Chris, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate your time, and I look forward to reading the next book too.
You're doing very good stuff with this website. I think a lot of people appreciate it, and like I said, I think we would all like to hear you interviewed on here at some point as well. But
someday there's going to be Sadie Hawkins Day, and they're going to turn it around, and you guys are going to have to listen to me for the whole hour.
I think that'd be great. I think a lot of people would be quite interested in that, just to see where you're coming from and your own background and things. I think it comes across in some of the interviews, but I think we'd like to just sort of, interrogate you and grill you.
So an upcoming episode, I will be interrogated. Thanks again, Chris, for being here. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thanks very much for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the companion website at www.thesecularbuddhist.com, and you'll find an entire web page devoted to this and every episode. There are also links to discussions about today's topic on the Secular Buddhist Facebook fan page. The music for the Secular Buddhist is used by permission from John Kaizan Neptune's CD, Steps in Time. Additional music is provided courtesy of Monty Levinson of Taihei Shakuhachi and Rodrigo Rodriguez. Their websites are linked on the Secular Buddhist on the About Music page. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on The Secular Buddhist.